God, I ask that your Holy Ghost speak through me. I ask it in your name and for your sake. Amen. Sometimes all you have is your principles. Now, Ecclesiastes 3:8 says there's a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. In Deuteronomy 20 verse 1 says, when thou goest out to battle against thine enemies and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And I want to read another scripture. John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. This sermon is to honor the more than 1 million Americans who gave the last full measure of service and devotion, and to all the heroes who went into harm's way and faced an uncertain fate defending the freedom too many today take for granted. These people had or have a husband or a wife or children and a mother or a father or a brother or a sister. Every single day is Memorial Day or Veterans Day to these families. My father was over 20 years in the Navy, and as an 18-year-old I signed up for the draft because I wanted to serve my country if called. If Nixon hadn't pulled the troops out of Vietnam, I would have gone to Vietnam because my parents raised me to appreciate the freedoms this country has given me. Try going to China and the Soviet Union and opening your mouth, and you'll find you don't have the same freedom you do here. Freedoms paid for in blood by our military heroes who volunteered for an uncertain fate thousands of miles away from home to protect these rights so many seem to take for granted today. Sally Field and other famous people praised Jane Fonda today. Too many people forget that Jane Fonda, who visited Hanoi as a guest of the North Vietnamese government, earned the nickname, quote unquote, earned the nickname Hanoi Jane because her broadcast put American soldiers at risk. Yet she enjoys the fame and money today, paid for with their blood. I think it's a crime that somebody like that should be allowed to be successful in this country when she has so little regard for the people who went into harm's way to protect her freedoms. Or think about this, Hollywood. Too many in Hollywood bending their values to satisfy China. According to a recent article in the Atlantic magazine, selling out to China, slapping America and the brave men and women in the face because Hollywood wants access to the Chinese consumers. China has simply become lucrative, so instead of honoring the nation that allows them to do business and the heroes who defend their freedom to do so, Hollywood bites the carrot to sell out to China. Consider Leonardo DiCaprio and Steven Seagal traveling to the Soviet Union to meet in person with Putin. This is evidence that too many no longer appreciate the freedom they take for granted that other people have paid for. So we need to recognize on more than just Memorial Day and Veterans Day our military who protect our freedoms. And government leaders need to be careful about sending these men and women into harm's way for just a blood for money war. They need to be sure that going to war is justified, like it was in the case of World War II, where we were having to defeat Hitler to save lives and protect our world. Genesis 4:10 says, and this is God in Genesis 4:10, and God said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Whenever one of our military men and women die, their blood cries from the ground to God, and God hears them. So our governments, especially these leaders in the government that have never served themselves, had better be careful before sending our brave men and women into harm's way for just a blood for oil war or a blood for money war. Because they're going to have to give account to God one day for what they do. Because these people, these soldiers, these men and women in the military have principles. Or they wouldn't sign up, they wouldn't volunteer to go to an uncertain fate to protect us if they didn't have principles. And that's something to think about. Because it's like a tipping point when the people with principles, like these brave men and women, and the people that go out and work hard every day, when they get tired and they give up, then our country's in trouble. And it's scary, but we could get to a point, if we're not careful, if we keep bailing people out like CEOs and stuff that don't deserve it, if the core of our country, the ones that really accomplish things like our brave men and women in the military protecting our freedoms, and our first responders at home protecting us, if they ever give up because they think, if they ever give up, we're in trouble. So we need to be careful who we bail out, that we protect our soldiers, protect our first responders, and help them, and quit bailing out the CEOs of these companies that have gambled away people's retirements. Now, if some of these people, that's like Jane Fonda and others that speak out against our military, if they're not going to stand behind our troops, then maybe they should consider standing in front of them. This is important. Our veterans, like my dad, they give up their yesterdays so that you could have your tomorrows. Veterans, servicemen and women, heroes and fallen heroes and their survivors, people who gave all so our nation might live. This is the definition of honor. Every Memorial Day and Veterans Day we undertake this rite of remembrance of their service, but every other day of the year we should not forget that freedom isn't free. This is the definition of honor. They volunteer, are willing to pay the ultimate price if necessary to protect our freedom. It never gets easier for the families who have lost people or had their sons, daughters, or parents lost or injured in battle, or for the injured or fallen heroes. They have honor within them. They have honor within them to protect our democracy at home. They don't get rich. They don't get rich doing it, but a strong element of faith within them calls them to a duty we should all be willing to share. We are at a tipping point in our country when we are not willing to support those we send into harm's way and who volunteer to go into harm's way, and respect and care for our military heroes and their families when they come home, and when they don't. We have lost honor, and when a nation loses honor, it won't make it, friend. It won't last. It is a crime against us that we should allow any veteran to be homeless, or that we should support any Hollywood actor and make them rich who doesn't honor the brave heroes who went into harm's way for them and others. We are the inheritors of the legacy of the brave. Their courage should never be forgotten.